The late afternoon sun painted Chicago's downtown streets in shades of amber and gold as 16-year-old Kiara Davis pushed through the glass doors of Apex Warrior Martial Arts Academy. The building gleamed with the kind of polish that money bought, floor-to-ceiling mirrors, pristine white mats, a wall of trophies that caught the light like promises. Her worn sneakers squeaked against the polished hardwood floor as she approached the reception desk, clutching a crumpled brochure in her sweaty palm. Through the windows of the main training room she could see them. 4 students in crisp white GIs with black belts tied perfectly around their waists, moving through kata with synchronized precision. They were everything martial arts magazines promised: lean, athletic, confident. Everything she wasn't. Have you ever walked into a space where you knew instantly you didn't belong? If you believe everyone deserves respect, regardless of their appearance, smash that subscribe button, because this story is about to show you that assumptions about strength can be deadly. Kiara's reflection stared back at her from the mirrored walls. At 5'3" and 200 pounds, her body didn't match the images of martial artists she'd grown up admiring. Her natural hair was pulled into a simple bun, her face round and sweet. Her clothes, an oversized t-shirt and baggy sweatpants, chosen for comfort rather than style. She carried her weight in her hips and stomach, curves that drew stares and comments wherever she went. The 4 black belts noticed her immediately. She felt their eyes like physical weight, scanning, judging, dismissing. The tallest one, a blond guy whose name tag read Trent, elbowed his training partner. "You seeing this?" His voice carried across the room, loud enough to be heard but quiet enough to maintain plausible deniability. Wade, a shorter student with a buzz cut, turned to look. His lip curled in barely concealed disgust. "What's she doing here? The community center's 3 blocks down." The others laughed. That particular laugh designed to wound while maintaining the pretense of joking. Garrett, the 3rd student, set down his water bottle with exaggerated care. "Maybe she's lost. Looking for the all-you-can-eat place?" More laughter, sharper this time. The 4th student, a lean guy with a ponytail named Shane, just stared at Kiara with the kind of blank contempt reserved for things considered beneath notice. The young woman behind the desk, a petite blonde named Rebecca, looked up with a professional smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Can I help you?" The emphasis on help suggested Kiara needed saving from some kind of mistake. "I'd like to sign up for classes," Kiara said quietly. "The beginner level." Rebecca blinked. "You want to take martial arts classes? Here." Not a question. A statement that required clarification. "Yes, ma'am," the brochure said. "Our classes are pretty intense," Rebecca interrupted, her tone shifting to that particular kind of concern that masks judgment. "Very physical. Lots of cardiovascular work, strength training, flexibility requirements." She looked pointedly at Kiara's body. "Maybe you'd be more comfortable at a yoga studio, something lower impact." The training room had gone quiet. All 4 black belts had stopped their practice, now openly watching. Lawrence Harrison, the head instructor, emerged from his office. At 48, Lawrence projected the kind of authority built on decades of martial arts mastery and the comfort of privilege. His white GI was crisp, his black belt worn soft with use, his movements fluid with the confidence of someone who'd never been questioned about belonging anywhere. "What's going on here?" Lawrence's voice carried that particular boom instructors cultivated. Rebecca gestured toward Kiara like presenting evidence. "This young lady wants to sign up for classes." Lawrence's eyes traveled over Kiara slowly. She saw his assessment in real time. The flicker of surprise, the quick calculation, the settling into judgment. "Is that so?" He approached the counter, and Kiara noticed how the other students formed a loose circle, sensing entertainment about to unfold. "What makes you think you're suited for martial arts?" "I've been training since I was 6, Kiara replied, keeping her voice steady despite the trembling in her hands. Lawrence's eyebrows rose in theatrical skepticism. Training since 6. Really? He turned to his students, playing to his audience. Hear that, everyone? We've got an expert. The sarcasm was heavy enough to suffocate with. Where exactly have you been training? My grandfather's dojo in... Let me guess. Lawrence cut her off, circling now like a predator. Some community center program, after-school special, maybe YouTube tutorials? His students laughed on cue. Because I've been teaching martial arts for 27 years, and I can tell just by looking at someone whether they have what it takes. He stopped directly in front of Kiara, invading her personal space deliberately. Real martial arts requires discipline, commitment, physical conditioning that takes years of sacrifice. It requires pushing your body to its absolute limits, controlling every pound of weight, every muscle, every movement with precision. He gestured at her body with undisguised disdain. It requires looking like an athlete, not like someone who gave up on themselves. The words hit like physical blows. Kiara felt tears threatening, but forced them down. Sir, I just want to... What you want? Lawrence's voice rose, filling the space with aggressive authority. Doesn't matter. What matters is maintaining the standards of this academy. We have a reputation. We produce champions, Olympic competitors, national title holders. Not... He gestured at her again, letting the silence complete his sentence. Trent stepped forward, emboldened by his instructor's lead. You know what I think? I think she saw our success stories and thought she could just buy a black belt. Pay some money, get a certificate, pretend she earned something. He looked at Lawrence for approval. That's what people like her always do. Take shortcuts, claim victim status when they don't get handed things they didn't earn. The racist undertones were clear to anyone paying attention. Kiara's brown skin wasn't just being dismissed, it was being weaponized against her, combined with her weight into a double offense. You know what your problem is? Wade added, pulling out his phone. People like you think natural athleticism is enough. Think just showing up means something. He was already positioning his camera, ready to record. But this isn't street fighting. This isn't whatever they taught you in your neighborhood. This is actual discipline. Actual skill that people like you don't usually have the commitment to develop. Garrett laughed, a sound like breaking glass. I bet she's never even been in a real fight. Probably can't even see her own feet to kick. The cruelty was casual, practiced. How are you supposed to do martial arts when you can barely move without getting winded? When you can't control what you put in your mouth, how are you supposed to control your body in combat? Shane finally spoke, his voice dripping with condescension. This is embarrassing for everyone. Someone should tell her this is a waste of time before she hurts herself trying to do a basic stretch. Your kind doesn't have the discipline for this. Maybe try something easier. Lawrence held up a hand, his expression shifting to something that looked almost thoughtful. Actually, wait, I have a better idea. That dangerous smile appeared. You say you've been training since 6? Prove it. Kiara's stomach dropped. Excuse me? Prove it, Lawrence repeated louder now. Simple demonstration. Show us you're not completely full of it. He gestured toward the training mat. Trent here is one of our junior black belts. Very talented, very disciplined, very dedicated to maintaining his physical condition, unlike some people. Another pointed look at Kiara's body. If you can survive 30 seconds sparring with him without getting pinned, I'll consider letting you join a beginner class. The trap was obvious. Either Kiara declined and proved their point, that she was weak, unqualified, all talk. Or she accepted and got humiliated publicly. Trent was already bouncing on his toes, grinning with anticipation. I don't think that's necessary, Kiara tried. I can provide credentials, certificates from... Credentials can be faked, Lawrence interrupted. YouTube certificates don't mean anything. Any fool can print out a piece of paper. This is simple. You claim to have skills? Demonstrate them. Unless... His voice dripped with mock sympathy. You're scared, which would be understandable. Trent has been training seriously for 8 years. He's won regional competitions. He's in peak physical condition, not carrying around extra weight that slows you down. Not everyone has the dedication for that level of commitment. Michelle Park, a purple belt who'd been quietly observing from the corner, stepped forward. "Sensei Lawrence, this doesn't seem fair. She came to sign up for classes, not to—" "Michelle," Lawrence's voice cracked like a whip. "When I want input from purple belts, I'll ask for it. Until then, keep your mouth shut or find another dojo." Michelle's face flushed, but she stepped back. Kiara noticed her phone was out, camera discreetly pointed at the confrontation. "So, what's it going to be?" Lawrence pressed. "Show us what you've got, or admit you don't belong here and stop wasting everyone's time. Admit that people like you don't have what it takes for this level of training." The other students had formed a loose circle around the mat, phones out, anticipation palpable. This was entertainment to them. A fat black girl getting humiliated by a lean white black belt. Kiara looked at the exit. She could walk out. Should walk out. But something in Lawrence's smug expression, in Trent's cocky stance, in the casual cruelty of their assumptions, made her stop. They saw weakness, vulnerability, an easy target. What they didn't see, what they couldn't imagine, was the truth that her loose clothes and soft appearance concealed. 30 seconds? Kiara asked quietly. 30 seconds, Lawrence confirmed, checking his watch with theatrical importance. "Starting from first contact. If you're still standing and not pinned, I'll acknowledge you have some basic competence. If Trent pins you, which he will, you leave and we never see you again. Deal?" Kiara set down her bag slowly. "Deal." The students cheered, phones recording every angle. Trent stepped onto the mat, rolling his shoulders, cracking his neck. "Don't worry," he called out to his friends. "This won't take long. Probably more like 5 seconds than 30. Girl can barely fit through the door. No way she can move fast enough." More laughter. Lawrence positioned himself as referee. "Everyone record this," he announced. "This is a lesson in why we have standards. Why we don't just let anyone join because they want to play martial artist. Why physical conditioning matters more than feelings." He looked at Kiara one more time. "Last chance to back out and save yourself some embarrassment." Kiara stepped onto the mat. She didn't respond, didn't engage with the mockery. Just moved to the center and took a stance, feet shoulder-width apart, weight distributed evenly, hands loose at her sides. It was a stance so fundamentally correct that Lawrence frowned slightly, his confidence flickering. "Ready?" Lawrence asked Trent, who was bouncing eagerly. "Been ready," Trent replied, grinning. "Let's show her what happens when people who don't belong try to play in spaces above their level." "Ready?" Lawrence asked Kiara. She simply nodded. "Begin." Trent moved fast. Credit where it was due, his technique was solid. He closed the distance in 2 quick steps, launching a combination that would overwhelm most beginners. Right jab, left cross, round kick to the midsection. Textbook MMA opening designed to test reactions and establish dominance. Kiara moved. What happened next would be replayed thousands of times on social media, analyzed frame by frame. But in the moment, to everyone watching, it seemed to happen in the space between heartbeats. Trent's first jab found nothing. Kiara had flowed to the side like water. His cross missed by inches as she dipped below it, her body moving with grace that comes from thousands of hours of practice. The round kick met her blocking forearm with such precise timing that the impact sent a visible shockwave through Trent's balance. Before he could recover, Kiara's counter began. Her palm strike to his solar plexus was controlled, but devastating. Trent's eyes went wide as all air evacuated his lungs in a surprised gasp. She didn't wait. Her foot swept his forward leg while simultaneously pushing his shoulder, using his own momentum against him. Trent went down hard, the mat absorbing impact with a sound like a body being dropped. 1 down. 3 seconds elapsed. Wade jumped onto the mat, abandoning his role as videographer. "Lucky shot!" he shouted, moving to attack from the side while Trent struggled to breathe. But Kiara had already pivoted, reading his intention before he'd fully committed. She ducked under his hook punch, her own strike catching the nerve cluster in his thigh. Wade's leg buckled instantly, dropping him to one knee with a yell of surprised pain. Kiara's elbow found the pressure point behind his ear, precisely placed to trigger his body's instinctive shutdown response. Wade collapsed beside Trent, conscious but unable to coordinate his movements. 2 down. 6 seconds elapsed. Garrett and Shane rushed her together, trying to use their numbers advantage. This was no longer following any formal sparring rules. This was preservation of ego, desperation to avoid humiliation. They never had a chance. Kiara dropped below their simultaneous strikes, sweeping Garrett's legs while driving her shoulder into Shane's midsection. Garrett went airborne before gravity remembered him, landing in a tangle of limbs. Shane stumbled backward from the shoulder check, his balance compromised just enough for Kiara's follow-up. A perfectly executed hip throw that sent him flying over her shoulder to land hard on his back. 4 black belts. 4 highly trained students who'd spent years perfecting their craft. All of them on the mat, struggling to stand or breathe or understand what had just happened. Total elapsed time: 8 seconds. The dojo was silent except for the sounds of 4 students groaning and the soft hum of phones still recording. Michelle Park stood frozen, her camera capturing everything, her mouth hanging open. Rebecca, the receptionist, had one hand covering her own mouth, eyes wide with disbelief. Lawrence Harrison stood like a statue, his watch still timing the 30 seconds that no longer mattered. His face had gone through several colors, red to white to a sickly green, as his brain tried to process what his eyes had just witnessed. Kiara straightened, not even breathing hard. "Should I continue?" she asked calmly. "Or have I demonstrated sufficient competence? If this moment of perfectly executed justice touched your heart, hit that like button and subscribe, because what happens next will prove that underestimating someone based on appearance is the most expensive mistake you can make." Lawrence's voice came out as barely more than a croak. Who are you?" Kiara reached into her bag and pulled out her phone. A few swipes brought up her credentials. She held the screen toward Lawrence, her expression neutral, but her eyes holding the weight of vindication. "Kiara Davis," she said quietly. 3-time national youth champion, 2-time Junior Olympics gold medalist in both kata and kumite, currently ranked number 2 in the country for my age and weight division. She paused, letting that sink in. "I've been training under Master Takeshi Nakamura. You might have heard of him. Olympic coach. He trains fighters in 6 different martial arts styles, and he's been working with me since I was 7 years old." The phone screen showed competition photos. Kiara in a proper GI, gold medals around her neck, standing next to one of the most respected martial arts masters in the world. Articles from Black Belt magazine. Video clips of her competing at national championships, moving with the same devastating efficiency she'd just demonstrated. "I came here," Kiara continued, her voice gaining strength, "because I'm visiting Chicago for a family wedding, and I wanted to find a local dojo to train at for the week I'm in town. I saw your brochure talking about discipline, respect, and honor." She looked around at the 4 students slowly getting to their feet, at Lawrence, whose face had drained of all color, at Michelle, who was still recording with tears streaming down her face. "I guess I was wrong about the respect and honor part." Trent limped to his feet, holding his stomach. "How?" he started but couldn't finish. "How am I so good while being fat and black?" Kiara finished for him. "Is that what you're asking? Because that's what you all assumed from the moment I walked through those doors, right? That someone who looks like me couldn't possibly be a real martial artist? That my body type means I'm undisciplined? That my skin color means I took shortcuts or didn't earn my achievements legitimately?" Garrett tried to speak, but Kiara wasn't finished. "Master Nakamura teaches that martial arts is about the spirit, not just the body. About discipline of the mind before discipline of the flesh. He teaches that judging someone's capability by their appearance is the mark of an amateur, not a master. Her eyes locked onto Lawrence. Seems like this academy forgot that lesson, or maybe never learned it in the first place. Michelle stepped forward, still filming. "I've got everything recorded," she said to Kiara, her voice shaking with emotion. "Every insult, every racist assumption, every cruel comment about your body. All of it." She looked at Lawrence with disgust. "This is going on every martial arts forum I can find." Lawrence found his voice, though it came out weak. "Now wait a minute. This was just a misunderstanding. If you'd told us who you were, if I'd told you I was a national champion, would that have mattered?" Kiara cut him off. "Would you have believed me? Or would you have assumed I was lying, because I showed you proof? I told you I'd been training since 6. I offered to show you certificates, and you dismissed everything because of how I look." She stepped closer to Lawrence, and despite being a foot shorter, her presence filled the space. "You didn't ask about my training. You didn't inquire about my background. You took one look at my body and my skin and decided I didn't deserve basic respect." "That's not fair," Rebecca interjected defensively. "We were just being realistic about what?" Kiara turned to face her. "About how fat black girls can't be athletes? About how my body type automatically disqualifies me? You made it about race and weight from the beginning. You didn't see a potential student. You saw someone to mock." Wade, finally recovered enough to stand, tried a different approach. "Look, you have to understand." "Understand what?" Kiara's voice rose for the first time. "That you people don't think I belong? That's what you said. People like me. You made it about race from the very beginning." Shane spoke up quietly. "This isn't what we intended." "Just what?" Michelle interrupted, her anger boiling over. "Just being casually racist? Just making fun of someone's body? I've been training here for 2 years, and this is what I see constantly. Students being dismissed because they don't look right, and Sensei Lawrence encourages it." She turned to Lawrence. "You talk about discipline and respect, but you model discrimination. You claim martial arts is about personal growth, but you judge people before they get a chance to show what they can do." Lawrence's face had gone through several more color changes. We can discuss this." "There's no misunderstanding," Kiara said firmly. "You made yourself perfectly clear. Your standards aren't about skill, they're about appearance, about who you think deserves to be here based on how they look. And that's not martial arts, that's discrimination with a black belt." She gathered her bag. "I'll be contacting the National Martial Arts Association about this academy's practices. I'll be sharing Michelle's video with every major publication, and I'll be making sure that Master Nakamura knows exactly how one of his potential students was treated." Lawrence went pale. "Master Nakamura? You don't have to. We can work something out." "I don't need anything from you," Kiara replied coldly. "What I needed was basic respect. The same consideration you'd give to anyone who walks through those doors. But you couldn't even offer that." She walked toward the exit, Michelle following. At the door, Kiara turned back. "Those 4 students on your mat? They just got defeated in 8 seconds by someone you called undisciplined. Maybe ask yourself what that says about your teaching, because you're not training warriors. You're training people to underestimate others based on prejudice, and that's the most dangerous lesson you can teach." The door closed behind her with a soft click that sounded like a gavel falling. Outside, the Chicago evening had turned the sky shades of purple and gold. Kiara took a deep breath. Michelle caught up to her on the sidewalk. "That was incredible," Michelle said, wiping tears. "What you said in there, it needed to be said." "Thank you for recording," Kiara replied. "I've been documenting stuff like this for months," Michelle admitted. "But you didn't just call him out. You proved him wrong in the most spectacular way possible." Kiara smiled slightly. "Master Nakamura always says the best response to disrespect is excellence. Show them what they missed, make them regret their assumptions. Mission accomplished. Michelle held up her phone. This video is already being shared. The comments are exploding. People are recognizing you from competitions. Former students are coming forward about being bullied out. Kiara's phone buzzed with a call from an unfamiliar number. Hello? Kiara Davis? The voice was professional, female, authoritative. This is Sandra Coleman from the National Martial Arts Integrity Commission. We've just seen video footage from an incident at Apex Warrior Academy. We need to discuss what happened there. Sandra Coleman's voice carried the weight of authority that came from 20 years investigating martial arts academy violations. Within hours of Michelle's video going viral, the National Martial Arts Integrity Commission had opened an emergency investigation. By the time Kiara returned to her aunt's house that evening, her phone wouldn't stop buzzing with messages from reporters, fellow competitors, and martial arts organizations across the country. The video had exploded across social media platforms. 8 seconds of devastating technique that shattered every assumption Lawrence Harrison had made. The hashtag #RespectAllFighters was trending nationally. Comments flooded in from people who'd experienced similar discrimination. Athletes dismissed because of their size, their race, their gender, their age. Kiara's moment of vindication had become a rallying cry for everyone who'd ever been told they didn't belong. Master Takeshi Nakamura called personally from his training facility in San Diego. His voice was calm but carried an undercurrent of controlled fury. Kiara, I just watched the video. Are you injured? No, Master, I'm fine. Good, because tomorrow you and I are flying to Chicago together. We're going to have a conversation with Mr. Harrison about what honor actually means. The next morning, Kiara returned to Apex Warrior Academy. But this time, she wasn't alone. Master Nakamura walked beside her, his presence commanding despite his modest height. At 72, he moved with the fluid grace of someone half his age. Behind them, Sandra Coleman carried a briefcase full of documentation. Michelle Park had organized a group of former students who'd been bullied out of the academy, 17 people, all clutching their own evidence of discrimination. Lawrence Harrison stood in his empty dojo, staring at the photos on his wall. Competition victories, tournament trophies, newspaper articles praising his teaching methods, 27 years of building a reputation, and it had all crumbled in 8 seconds. His phone had been ringing non-stop, parents withdrawing their children, sponsors canceling contracts, the building's landlord asking pointed questions about lease violations. When the door opened and Kiara walked in wearing a proper gi with Master Nakamura beside her, Lawrence felt his remaining composure shatter. He recognized the master immediately. Everyone in martial arts knew Nakamura's face. Olympic coach, developer of 3 revolutionary training techniques, author of the definitive text on competitive fighting strategy, and now he was here in Lawrence's disgraced academy, his expression carrying the kind of disappointment that cut deeper than anger. Mr. Harrison. Master Nakamura's voice was soft, but filled the space completely. I believe we need to discuss your understanding of martial arts philosophy. Lawrence opened his mouth, closed it. What could he possibly say? The evidence was everywhere, on video, in testimonials, in the pattern of students who'd been systematically dismissed or humiliated based on appearance rather than ability. Sandra Coleman stepped forward, opening her briefcase. Mr. Harrison, I'm here representing the National Martial Arts Integrity Commission. Based on video evidence and 17 formal complaints filed in the past 24 hours, we're revoking your teaching credentials pending a full investigation. 17? Lawrence's voice cracked. Michelle spoke up from the group of former students. Everyone you drove away, everyone you told didn't belong. Everyone whose dreams you crushed because they didn't fit your narrow definition of what a martial artist should look like. We're all here now, and we all have stories. One by one, they stepped forward. A woman who'd been told she was too old at 35. A young man with cerebral palsy who'd been dismissed as unable to learn proper technique. Three teenagers of various ethnicities who'd been subjected to racist comments disguised as training advice. A transgender student who'd been banned from locker rooms and eventually pushed out entirely. Two overweight students who'd endured constant body shaming masked as motivation. Each story was a variation on the same theme. Lawrence's academy had become a place where discrimination flourished under the guise of maintaining standards, where physical appearance mattered more than dedication or skill, where students learned that belittling others was acceptable as long as you wrapped it in the language of discipline and excellence. "I never meant," Lawrence started, but Master Nakamura raised a hand. "What you meant is irrelevant. What you did is documented. What you taught, the example you set for your students, that is what matters." He turned to look at the wall of trophies. "You won competitions, produced skilled fighters, but you forgot the most fundamental lesson of martial arts, that we teach people to be better than they were, not just technically but morally, spiritually. We build character, not just muscle." He turned back to Lawrence, and his eyes held something close to pity. "You took a sacred practice and turned it into a tool for discrimination. You used your authority to harm rather than help. And in doing so, you betrayed everything these walls are supposed to represent." Sandra Coleman pulled out official documentation. "The Commission is forwarding this case to the State Athletic Board with a recommendation for permanent credential revocation. Additionally, 17 civil suits have been filed against you and this academy for discrimination, emotional distress, and violation of civil rights. The combined damages being sought exceed $2 million. Lawrence's legs gave out. He caught himself against the reception desk, his expensive athletic facility suddenly feeling like a prison. $2 million. I don't have that kind of money." "That's what happens when you build an empire on discrimination," Michelle said coldly. "Eventually, the bill comes due." Kiara had remained quiet through all of this, watching Lawrence's world collapse with the same neutral expression she'd worn during their confrontation. Now she stepped forward, and Lawrence flinched despite himself. "Mr. Harrison," Kiara said quietly, "you asked me yesterday who I was. You wanted credentials, proof, validation that I deserved to be here. But the real question is, who are you? What kind of person uses their authority to crush others? What kind of teacher looks at a student and sees only their body or their skin color rather than their potential?" She gestured at the group behind her. "These people came to you seeking growth, seeking to learn, seeking to challenge themselves, and you met them with cruelty and prejudice. You could have been part of their journey. Instead, you became an obstacle they had to overcome." Lawrence tried to meet her eyes, but couldn't. "I thought I was maintaining standards, protecting the integrity of martial arts." "No," Master Nakamura said sharply. "You were protecting your ego, your narrow worldview, your comfort with seeing certain types of people in positions of power and others in positions of service. That's not teaching, that's gatekeeping, and it has no place in any dojo that claims to honor the martial arts." The weeks that followed moved with the inexorable momentum of justice long delayed. The State Athletic Board convened a formal hearing. Lawrence Harrison stood before a panel of 7 judges, masters from various disciplines, representing decades of combined experience and wisdom. The hearing room was packed with observers, reporters, and former students eager to see accountability finally delivered. The prosecution presented their case with devastating efficiency. Michelle's video played on a large screen, showing Lawrence's contempt in high definition. His words, "people like you," maintaining standards, looking like an athlete, echoed through the room. Expert witnesses testified about the psychological harm of discrimination in athletic training. Medical professionals discussed the long-term effects of body shaming on young athletes. Former students told their stories. Some cried, others spoke with barely controlled anger. All of them described a pattern of systematic exclusion that had nothing to do with skill and everything to do with Lawrence's prejudices. Trent, Wade, Garrett, and Shane were called to testify. They sat in the witness chairs, pale and uncomfortable, forced to recount their own participation in the harassment. Their black belts had been suspended pending investigation. Their competition standings were under review. Everything they'd worked for was tainted by association with Lawrence's methods. "Did you mock Ms. Davis's appearance?" the prosecutor asked Trent. "Yes," he admitted quietly. "Did you assume she was incompetent based on her body type?" "Yes." "Did you learn these attitudes from your instructor?" Trent looked at Lawrence, then back at the prosecutor. "Yes. He always said we had to maintain standards, that certain types of people didn't belong in elite training." The defense attorney, a middle-aged man who looked increasingly uncomfortable with his client, tried to argue that Lawrence's comments were taken out of context, that his teaching methods were demanding but not discriminatory, that the video showed an isolated incident blown out of proportion by social media outrage. Then, Master Nakamura took the stand. His testimony was measured, authoritative, and completely devastating. He walked the panel through proper martial arts philosophy, the principles of respect, humility, and recognition that strength comes in many forms. He contrasted those principles with Lawrence's documented behavior. He explained how discrimination in training environments doesn't just harm individual students, it corrupts the entire practice, turning martial arts from a tool for personal growth into a weapon of social control. "Mr. Harrison had the privilege of teaching," Master Nakamura said, his voice filling the silent hearing room. "He had students who trusted him to guide their development, and he abused that trust by imposing his prejudices onto their training. He taught them that judging others by appearance was not only acceptable but necessary, that cruelty could be disguised as maintaining standards, that discrimination could be called discipline." He looked directly at Lawrence. "He took something sacred and made it ugly, and that is unforgivable." The panel deliberated for 3 hours. When they returned, the head judge, a 78-year-old woman named Margaret Chen who held master rankings in 4 different martial arts, read their decision with the gravity it deserved. "Mr. Harrison, this panel has reviewed extensive evidence of systematic discrimination, harassment, and abuse of authority. We have heard testimony from multiple victims whose athletic development was damaged or destroyed by your actions. We have seen video evidence of you engaging in racist and body-shaming behavior toward a minor seeking instruction." She paused, letting the weight of those words settle. "The martial arts are built on principles of honor, respect, and recognition of human potential, regardless of physical appearance. You have violated every one of those principles. Your behavior is antithetical to everything we teach and represent. Therefore, this panel unanimously votes to permanently revoke your teaching credentials in all martial arts disciplines. You are banned from operating any training facility, teaching any classes, or claiming any affiliation with recognized martial arts organizations." Lawrence's face had gone gray. Permanent revocation meant his career was over. Everything he'd built for 27 years, gone. "Furthermore," Judge Chen continued, "we are recommending criminal charges be filed for assault of a minor, given that Ms. Davis was 16 at the time of the incident, and your actions meet the legal definition of assault through threat and intimidation. We are also forwarding our findings to the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice, as the pattern of discrimination documented here may constitute federal violations." The gavel came down with a sound like a door slamming shut on Lawrence's entire life. The civil suits followed quickly. 17 plaintiffs, represented by a legal team that specialized in discrimination cases, filed a consolidated lawsuit seeking damages for emotional distress, lost opportunities, and violation of civil rights. The evidence was overwhelming. Years of documented harassment, patterns of racial and body-based discrimination, systematic exclusion of students who didn't fit Lawrence's aesthetic preferences. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Every day, the courtroom filled with supporters wearing "Respect All Fighters" shirts. Master Nakamura attended every session, sitting in the front row, his presence a silent reminder of what martial arts was supposed to represent. Lawrence's defense crumbled under the weight of evidence. Text messages between him and other instructors discussing how to discourage undesirable students. Financial records showing he'd actively recruited affluent white families while turning away scholarship applicants from minority communities. Testimony from his own former students about the toxic culture he'd cultivated. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, the verdict was unanimous. Guilty on all counts. The judge awarded damages totaling $2.8 million more than the plaintiffs had requested, sending a clear message about the severity of Lawrence's actions. His academy building was ordered seized and sold to help pay the judgment. His personal assets, the expensive car, the luxury condo, the investment accounts, all of it would go toward compensating the people he'd harmed. But perhaps the most devastating consequence came from an unexpected source. Trent, Wade, Garrett, and Shane, the 4 students who'd participated in harassing Kiara, stood before the judge in a separate hearing. They'd been charged as juveniles with assault and harassment. Their attorney argued they'd been following their instructor's example, that they were victims of Lawrence's corrupt teaching as much as participants in it. The judge wasn't entirely unsympathetic. You're young. You can learn from this. But actions have consequences, and those consequences need to be proportional to the harm you've caused. Each of them received 200 hours of community service at youth athletic programs serving underprivileged communities. They were required to complete intensive diversity and sensitivity training. Their black belts were permanently revoked, though they could test again after 2 years if they could demonstrate genuine personal growth. And they had to write letters of apology, not just to Kiara, but to every person who'd witnessed their behavior. Every young person who might have been discouraged from trying martial arts because of their example. Trent broke down crying as the sentence was read. "I'm sorry," he sobbed, looking at Kiara in the gallery. "I'm so sorry. I didn't understand. I thought—" Kiara's expression remained neutral. She didn't owe him forgiveness, but she nodded once, acknowledging his words, allowing him the possibility of redemption even if she wasn't ready to grant absolution. As the courtroom cleared, Lawrence Harrison sat alone at the defense table, his expensive suit wrinkled, his face haggard. His attorney had already left, the bill wouldn't be paid, and there were no more appeals to file. Everything was gone. His career, his reputation, his financial security, his sense of identity. Sandra Coleman approached him one final time. "Mr. Harrison, you have a choice now about who you want to be going forward. You can spend the rest of your life bitter about how you were caught, or you can actually learn something from this. Actually examine the prejudices that brought you here. Actually become the kind of person who deserves to teach." She placed a business card on the table. "There's a restorative justice program for people who've committed discrimination. It's voluntary. No one can force you to attend. But if you ever want to understand the harm you've caused, really understand it, that's where you should start." Lawrence looked at the card but didn't pick it up. Sandra didn't wait for a response. She'd done what she could. The rest was up to him. Justice had been served. The trial was over. But the story wasn't quite finished yet. If you believe racists should face real consequences for their actions, hit that subscribe button and drop a like in the comments. And tell us, have you ever witnessed discrimination in sports or athletics? Because what happened next would show the world that accountability is just the beginning, and true transformation requires even more. 6 months after the trial, Kiara Davis stood on a stage at the National Youth Martial Arts Championship, not as a competitor this time, but as a keynote speaker. The auditorium held 3,000 young athletes from across the country, every skin color, every body type, every background imaginable. Master Nakamura sat in the front row, his eyes bright with pride. "When I walked into that dojo in Chicago," Kiara began, her voice steady and clear, "I knew what they saw. They saw my body, they saw my skin, and they decided in that moment that I didn't belong, that I couldn't possibly have earned my skills, that someone who looked like me had no place in their world." The auditorium was silent except for the soft sound of 3,000 young people listening with complete attention. But here's what they didn't see. They didn't see the thousands of hours I'd trained, the mornings I woke up at 5 a.m. to practice before school, the competitions where I fought through pain and doubt and fear, the discipline it took to master techniques that didn't come naturally. They didn't see any of that because they chose not to look past my appearance. She paused, letting her words sink in. And that was their loss, not mine. Because I knew who I was. I knew what I'd earned, and when they challenged me to prove myself, I did exactly that. Not because I needed their validation, but because I refused to let their prejudice define my worth. The applause started slowly, then built like a wave crashing against shore. Young athletes stood, cheering, many with tears streaming down their faces. They saw themselves in her story. Every person who'd been told they were too fat, too thin, too dark, too feminine, too masculine, too anything to belong in spaces that should have welcomed them. Master Nakamura joined her on stage. Kiara's story became a catalyst for change across our entire organization, he announced. Because of her courage in speaking out, we've implemented new standards for all certified training facilities, mandatory diversity training for all instructors, zero-tolerance policies for discrimination, anonymous reporting systems for students who experience harassment, and most importantly, regular audits to ensure our dojos reflect the true spirit of martial arts. That strength comes in infinite forms, and everyone who seeks to learn deserves respect. The National Martial Arts Association had moved swiftly after the scandal. Lawrence Harrison's case became a turning point, exposing problems that had festered in the competitive martial arts world for decades. 15 other academies were investigated following student complaints. 8 had their certifications revoked. Dozens of instructors faced disciplinary action for discriminatory practices. But the changes went deeper than punishment. New curriculum was developed teaching instructors how to recognize and counter their own biases. Scholarship programs were established specifically for students from underrepresented communities. Body-positive training protocols were created, emphasizing health and technique over achieving a specific aesthetic. Anti-racism workshops became mandatory for anyone seeking certification at black belt level or higher. Kiara became the face of this transformation. At 17, she was invited to join the National Board of Youth Athletics as their youngest ever advisor. She consulted with training facilities across the country, helping them create inclusive environments. She spoke at schools, community centers, and athletic conferences about the importance of looking beyond appearance to recognize true potential. The former Apex Warrior Academy building had been purchased by a non-profit organization and converted into a community martial arts center. The expensive equipment remained, but now it was available to anyone regardless of their ability to pay. Classes were offered in multiple languages. Adaptive programs were created for students with disabilities. Body diversity was celebrated rather than stigmatized. Michelle Park became the head instructor, bringing the philosophy she'd always believed in, but had been afraid to voice under Lawrence's leadership. On the wall where Lawrence's competition photos had hung, there was now a mural painted by local youth, martial artists of every size, color, age, and ability, their bodies in motion, their faces showing determination and joy. "This is what a real dojo looks like," Michelle told reporters who came to document the transformation. "This is what happens when you prioritize people over prejudice. When you recognize that martial arts is for everyone, not just people who fit a narrow definition of what an athlete should look like." The 4 students who'd harassed Kiara completed their community service and sensitivity training. The experience changed them in ways their previous martial arts education never had. Trent volunteered at an inner-city youth center, teaching basic self-defense to kids who reminded him uncomfortably of who he'd been before his worldview shattered. Wade worked with adaptive sports programs for disabled athletes, learning that strength had nothing to do with conventional ability. Garrett and Shane both wrote essays about their experience that were published in martial arts journals, cautionary tales about how easily prejudice can masquerade as standards. They would never get their black belts back from Apex Warrior, but they'd earned something more valuable, the understanding that true strength comes from character, not from putting others down. 2 years after the incident, Kiara competed in the World Youth Championships. She'd grown into her body with confidence, no longer hiding behind oversized clothes. She wore her GI with pride, her natural hair in elaborate braids decorated with beads that clicked softly as she moved. She'd put on muscle, gotten stronger, but her body type remained the same, curvy, powerful, beautiful in its own right. She dominated her division, winning gold in both kata and kumite, but the real victory came during the medal ceremony. As she stood on the podium, cameras flashing, she looked into the crowd and saw hundreds of young athletes who'd been inspired by her story. Athletes who'd almost given up because someone told them they didn't look like champions. Athletes who'd found the courage to keep training, to keep competing, to keep believing in themselves because she'd shown them it was possible. Master Nakamura presented her medal, and as he placed it around her neck, he whispered, "Your grandfather would be so proud. You didn't just master martial arts. You reminded the world what martial arts is supposed to be." That evening, Kiara's phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. She almost deleted it. She still got occasional hate mail from people who thought she'd been too harsh on Lawrence, who believed in the old ways of gatekeeping and exclusion. But something made her open it. "Ms. Davis, this is Lawrence Harrison. I know I have no right to contact you, and if you want to block this number, I understand. But I wanted you to know that I've been attending the Restorative Justice Program. It's been the hardest thing I've ever done. Facing what I did, understanding the harm I caused, I can never undo it, but I'm trying to become the kind of person who would never do it again. You were right about everything, and I'm sorry. I know that's not enough. But it's true." Kiara stared at the message for a long time. She didn't respond. Maybe someday she would, or maybe she wouldn't. Forgiveness was her choice to give or withhold. But she felt something shift inside her. A small release of the anger she'd been carrying. Not for his sake, but for her own. Lawrence Harrison had lost everything. His teaching career, his financial security, his reputation, his sense of identity. He lived in a modest apartment now, working a retail job that barely covered his expenses and the monthly payments toward his judgment debt. The martial arts world he'd once dominated had moved on without him, implementing changes that made his old methods obsolete. But in the Restorative Justice Program, something was shifting. Week after week, he sat in circles with other people who'd caused harm through discrimination. He listened to survivors tell their stories. He examined his own upbringing, the messages he'd internalized about who deserved respect and who didn't. He confronted the uncomfortable truth that his prejudices had been a choice, not an inevitability. He would never teach martial arts again. That door was permanently closed, but he volunteered at the transformed community center that had once been his academy, doing maintenance work and administrative tasks. He watched Michelle teach with the inclusivity he'd never practiced. He saw students of all types thriving in an environment free from his toxic influence. One day, he saw a young black girl enter for her first class, her body similar to Kiara's, her expression nervous and hopeful. He watched Michelle greet her with warmth and respect, asking about her goals, explaining the program, never once suggesting that her appearance was a barrier. He saw the girl's face light up with relief and excitement. That's when Lawrence finally understood. Really understood. The harm he'd caused wasn't just to the individuals he'd dismissed and mocked. It was to the entire practice of martial arts. It was to every young person who'd turned away from training because they'd been told they didn't belong. It was to the spirit of discipline and respect that should have been the foundation of everything he taught. He couldn't fix what he'd broken, but he could stop breaking things. That would have to be enough. 5 years after the incident that changed everything, Kiara Davis graduated from college with a degree in sports psychology and education. She'd continued competing throughout her college years, adding 3 more national championships to her collection. But her true passion had become helping create the kind of inclusive athletic environments she'd always wished existed. She opened her own training facility in Chicago. Not a traditional dojo, but a community center where martial arts was just one of many programs offered. There were adaptive classes for people with disabilities, body-positive fitness programs, mental health resources for athletes dealing with pressure and perfectionism, and mentorship programs connecting experienced competitors with newcomers who needed support. On the wall of the main training room hung a photo from that day at Apex Warrior Academy. 8 seconds captured in sequential images, 4 black belts falling, one after another, defeated by the girl they'd dismissed as incompetent. Beneath it, a plaque read, "Never judge strength by appearance. True warriors recognize potential in all forms." Master Nakamura attended the grand opening, cutting the ribbon with Kiara as cameras flashed and the community cheered. "You've come so far," he told her quietly. "From that angry, hurt 16-year-old to this, someone who took pain and transformed it into purpose. That's the truest form of martial arts mastery." Kiara smiled, watching young students of every description warming up on the mats. "I learned from the best, Master. You taught me that martial arts isn't about defeating opponents. It's about overcoming the obstacles that try to define us, including the obstacle of other people's prejudice." The facility thrived. Within a year, it served over 500 students. Success stories poured in. Students who'd been told they were too fat, too clumsy, too old, too anything, now thriving in an environment that celebrated their dedication rather than critiquing their appearance. Several went on to compete nationally. Others simply found joy in movement, confidence in their bodies, and community in a space that welcomed them as they were. Michelle Park joined as head instructor, bringing her decade of experience and her commitment to the inclusive philosophy they both believed in. Together, they created a model that other facilities began to replicate. The transformation that started with 8 seconds of vindication rippled outward, changing the landscape of martial arts training across the country. One afternoon, a young woman entered Kiara's office. She was Latina, maybe 19, with a body type similar to what Kiara's had been at 16. She clutched a crumpled brochure in her hands, her expression nervous and hopeful. "Hi," she said quietly. "I want to learn martial arts, but I've been to 3 different places and they all said I should lose weight first, or try something less intense, or—" Her voice trailed off. Kiara stood and walked around her desk. She recognized that look. The mixture of determination and defeat, the hope fighting against the expectation of rejection. "What's your name?" "Isabella." "Isabella, let me tell you something. Martial arts isn't about what your body looks like. It's about what your spirit can do. It's about discipline, dedication, and the courage to keep going even when people doubt you." She smiled. "And from where I'm standing, you've already demonstrated all 3 of those qualities just by walking through that door after being rejected 3 times. Isabella's eyes filled with tears. "Really? Really? Come on. Let's get you registered and show you around. You're going to love it here." As they walked toward the training room, Kiara thought about that 16-year-old girl who'd walked into Apex Warrior Academy clutching a similar brochure. The girl who'd been mocked, dismissed, and challenged to prove herself. The girl who'd responded with 8 seconds that changed everything. That girl had grown into a woman who made sure no one else had to prove themselves through humiliation, who created spaces where respect was given freely rather than earned through surviving harassment, who understood that true strength wasn't about defeating others, but about lifting them up. The circle was complete. The pain had been transformed into purpose, and the legacy would continue, one student at a time, one welcoming space at a time, one moment of respect at a time. What's your view about this story? If you were in Kiara's shoes, would you have had the grace to create positive change after experiencing such brutal discrimination? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If this story moved you, inspired you, or reminded you that everyone deserves respect regardless of their appearance, Hit that subscribe button for more true stories of justice and transformation. Smash the like button if you believe racists should face real consequences. Share this story with someone who needs to see that discrimination has a price. Comment below. Have you ever witnessed or experienced discrimination in sports or athletics? Where are you watching from? Tell us in the comments. Remember, true strength isn't about how you look. It's about how you treat others, how you overcome obstacles, and how you transform pain into purpose. Kiara proved that in 8 devastating seconds, but she spent years proving something even more important, that the best response to hate is building a world where hate has no place. Never judge a book by its cover. True warriors recognize strength in all forms.